When Birds of Prey was released this year to a pretty positive reception, I was honestly quite surprised. I haven't seen it myself, but I've been hearing from friends and critics alike that it's actually entertaining and worth a watch. I guess my surprise came from two main factors. First, because I was expecting it to just be a cash grab banking on Harley Quinn's popularity, and second, because I didn't much care for Suicide Squad. But I'm certainly willing to accept a film that I was expecting to be mediocre could turn out to actually be good, because for me the exact opposite happened with Suicide Squad. I was expecting that to actually be good, and it turned out to be... well, let's discuss that. What went wrong with Suicide Squad? Now, I know a lot of people do like this movie, and I'm not saying it's completely irredeemable. In fact, one of the problems I have with the movie is that I feel it has a lot of potential and some pretty good ideas in concept, but the execution of these ideas all too often, in my opinion, fall flat. The basic premise of Suicide Squad is, what if there was a superhero team that actually consisted of villains who've been made to fight for the good side? This gives way to a lot of potentially good storylines. A team of villains has the advantage of being able to think like the villain, not be stopped by the usual obstacle of moral obligations, and can be used to deal with the more controversial problems that a government would want to keep quiet, or problems that require a team considered disposable. Unfortunately, none of these potential plots are really used here. Instead, we have the Suicide Squad being sent in to deal with a generic doomsday villain, a boring, typical, overpowered villain who shouldn't really be threatened by any of them besides the one member who actually has superpowers. In other words, while the characters we're following may not be conventional, the storyline is a little too conventional. So, who are these characters? Well, first we have Deadshot, played by Will Smith. He's a master assassin who kills people for a living, but deep down really cares about his daughter and wants to be able to see her again. Whether Deadshot is an immoral bad guy looking to cheat the system, or just a punch clock villain who does have a heart deep down, is a bit up in the air, to be honest. He doesn't really have enough personal screen time to get his character across well enough. And I'll go deeper into that in a minute, but first let's talk about Harley Quinn. Harley is probably the best known of the group. She's the Joker's deranged girlfriend, and she really has no reason to be here in the story. She's not shown as having any important skills. She's not shown to be an evil genius underneath her over-the-top twisted persona. She does have one moment where she does outsmart the villain, but that's it. For the most part, she's just used as comic relief and eye candy, and has no reason to be added to the squad in story. And her persona often comes across less as a twisted little monster, and more like the living embodiment of one of those lol random normal people scare me Tumblr blogs. Captain Boomerang is about the only character I'd say genuinely comes across like a bad guy. The rest of the cast are sort of played like plucky underdogs seeking redemption, whereas this guy seems more like a jerk who's here to reap whatever benefits he can and not really care about anything else. And that's not a bad thing, since he actually does fit with the premise. But like Harley Quinn, he's not ever really very useful in the situation at hand. Killer Croc is sort of the typical big thuggish guy of the group, and he's another one of those that just doesn't get enough screen time. I mean, he's at least shown to have some actual uses with his weird, not particularly explained skin condition. El Diablo is the only character who actually has superpowers. Now, what I will say with regards to that is that, in theory, having an overpowered character in Suicide Squad arguably could make more sense than having one in a typical superhero squad movie like Justice League, since the Suicide Squad should be fighting the more underpowered villains like the Joker, El Diablo could, in theory, just fill the role of an emergency button in case one of those superpowerless villains suddenly breaks out an unexpected trick. Unfortunately, because this movie features a world-endingly powerful villain, it doesn't quite work. His character is one of the more interesting, given he's trying to seek redemption after inadvertently causing the death of his family, and his story arc is maybe a little more engaging than the rest, but it arguably comes across as too serious in tone, given while he's spending his time remorsing over what he's done and longing to be a better person, Harley Quinn is spouting one-liners and acting like she's on drugs most of the time. So that's the Suicide Squad. Wait, hold on, am I forgetting someone? Oh, yeah, Katana. Yeah, Katana's also there. While the issues of the squad as individuals are clear, one of the main problems is that there is no main character. Deadshot should fill this role, but as I say, he's simply not in focus enough. Amanda Waller, the corrupt leader of the project, is kind of the next closest thing to a protagonist that we have, but she makes more sense as an ambiguously evil authority figure. I mean, I know this is a teen movie, but when you throw a bunch of characters together for us to watch, usually it helps to have at least one that we can follow and to some degree identify with. One of the easiest comparisons to Suicide Squad is Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel's answer to the ragtag bunch of misfits that save the day. While Guardians also introduced new, strange and wacky characters, we are still following the lone human character Peter Quill, and a lot of our understandings of the other characters and the world come from his interactions with them. But on top of the lack of a lead protagonist, a big problem is how the movie is more focused on the action and the plot than on the characters, which wouldn't be such an issue if it weren't for the fact that the plot in question is really cliche, right down to the usual sky laser finale. Now, having a wacky character in a cliche plot can work, as Deadpool, for example, showed us. But the reason that film works is because the plot is never the main focus. The driving force of Deadpool is the character of Deadpool himself, who we're constantly spending time with, getting to know and love and laugh with. This works because his character is such a contrast to the much more serious characters like Francis or Colossus, and is all the more funny because of it. Much like how Deadpool the character is the main reason people go to see Deadpool the movie, the main draw of Suicide Squad should be the Suicide Squad themselves and their interactions. But unfortunately, there simply isn't enough of them. The film wastes too much time with action and exposition. We don't see enough of the characters, and we certainly don't see enough of their interactions with each other, or with the more serious parts of their world. People didn't go to see this movie because they were hungry for another big disastrous villain ending the world story again. I'd rather see the squad learning to work together and interacting while trying to outsmart a villain like the Joker, rather than fighting a bunch of boring possessed monsters. So, at this point, I really need to talk about the villain. The Enchantress is one part of this movie that I found very few people are willing to defend. Nonetheless, let me try to defend her just a little. Like a lot of things in this movie, her basic original idea actually kind of works. She's an ancient ghost who's possessing an innocent woman named June Moon, looking to escape from Amanda Waller's control. Her original design at the beginning is legitimately very good. Her look, her mannerisms, her voice, they all absolutely work. Unfortunately, then, midway through the film, she transforms into a much more generic looking villain. So instead of this creepy, fragile but terrifying villain trying to corrupt people, we get a boring, needlessly CGI villain whose motivation is now just destroy the world. And if I'm gonna talk about the main villain, I guess I need to at least mention the secondary villain. if you could even call him that. The Joker is in this movie pretty much just so that they could advertise that the Joker is in this movie. If Harley in the film is the human embodiment of normal people's scare me blogs, then the Joker is the embodiment of those welcome to my twisted mind blogs. To be honest, there's almost nothing left to say about this interpretation of the character at this point. Everyone has already trashed this performance, and unlike with the Enchantress, I really don't have any positives to cling to here. I guess the best thing to say is that this Joker appeals to edgy teens, but then again, now so does the Arthur Fleck Joker, so I guess Letos doesn't even have that anymore. He is to the Joker what George Clooney was to Batman. At this point, he's mostly just forgettable. So, if that's what went wrong, how would I put it right? Well, to start with, I would not have the characters introduced through Amanda Waller's exposition flashbacks. They don't add enough to the movie, and they feel more like trailer footage than actual movie footage. Instead, I'd have the movie begin with Deadshot as the main protagonist getting arrested, then approached by Waller in prison to be recruited by the Suicide Squad program. Make it clear that while Deadshot is a hardened criminal, he still loves his daughter, and he's torn between doing what's right for her and fighting against the system, but eventually he complies. When he's moved to a new prison to be trained to join the squad, possibly have him stuck in a cell with Captain Boomerang in order to build a proper dynamic with those two. The perfect contrast between a serious assassin wanting to fight to be with his daughter again, and an obnoxious bank robber who's only there for his own selfish gains. You know, a good old serious straight man being irritated by goofball sidekick scenario. This could actually help get both of their characters across. And then have the rest of the characters properly introduced to each other and to the audience during that scene where everyone's geared up for action. This was one of few moments in the movie that I actually thought did a decent job of subtly showing the characters' personalities, and I would keep it as it is in Rewrite. We see Deadshot checking out all the guns and putting on his old red suit, clearly liking the idea of going back to work. We see Captain Boomerang grabbing his silly pink unicorn. We see Killer Croc showing off his strength by ripping his shirt off. We see El Diablo just awkwardly grabbing a plain looking shirt, clearly not wanting to stand out. And we see Harley squeeing over her little hoard of goodies and desperately trying to look provocative to the guards. All in a way that get their characters across without actually having to say anything, doing a better job than the meaningless opening exposition. Speaking of Harley, I changed her character a fair bit too. If you want to justify her being on the squad, make it more clear that underneath the wild, deranged exterior, she's actually a lot smarter and more cunning than she looks. She is a doctor of psychology after all. Lean in more to the notion that a lot of her evil little girl act is very much just an act that's hiding a damaged but cunning sociopath underneath. I'd also introduce Rick Flag here, as the guy who's there to support June Moon, who hasn't escaped at this point, but mostly to act as the token normal guy that can react to the madness that he's witnessing in the appropriate fashion. Now, have the squad maybe be at each other's throats at first, but then as they're stuck together in some prison van probably, they start complaining about Waller, and then this moves on to them complaining about superheroes. Have Deadshot call out Batman for having arrested him in front of his daughter, with Harley agreeing and describing how Batman once ruined her date night. Then have Captain Boomerang argue that the Flash is worse and bragging about how the guy who beat him actually had superpowers unlike Batman. Maybe have El Diablo point out how he wishes he could use his powers to be more like the heroes, only for the others to point out that he's probably killed fewer people than Superman has, given how much collateral damage Superman causes. A scene like this would properly show what these people have in common, would be the proper place to add in the flashback scenes, would provide a little fan service by mentioning all the superhero characters, and would give the squad a reason to get along. While a lot of folks have suggested that the Joker should have been the main villain of the movie, and I can understand why, I'd say there would be a way to make the Enchantress work. just keep her in her original underpowered form. I'd say have the Suicide Squad have a sort of test mission where they take out some generic mobsters, which all seems to go well until Enchantress manages to escape and reclaim her heart. Heck, I'd even tried to build the relationship between June Moon and her boyfriend Rick Flag by having him there to look after and control the Enchantress's heart, and have the Enchantress force him to give it up by threatening to kill herself and thus kill his girlfriend too. Then, instead of her trying to destroy the world, have her start possessing members of the gang they took out and start some kind of mysterious cult dedicated to worshipping her and enacting some kind of ritual on her heart to return her to power. Waller would then send in the squad to deal with her before she can restore that power. And to address the complaint of not sending in the heroes, I'd have Deadshot call her out on this by saying she should send in the reliable heroes like Batman and the Flash, and she could argue back that she doesn't want anyone, including the superheroes, to find out the government allowed such a being loose in the city, nor does she want them to know that they've been taking advantage of June Moon, and that he needs to comply with her orders if he ever wants to see his daughter again. That way, you can present Waller as a morally ambiguous character without her just blatantly shooting innocent people. On top of that, since Enchantress isn't so powerful, rather than sending her weird eye monster army, she could fight the squad in a much more creative fashion, using her illusions and visions. Her eerie first design is something the movie really should have taken advantage of more. Her whispering from the shadows and making them question what's real or not would have been a lot more effective than weird CGI hula dancing. On top of this, I would have had Harley Quinn seemingly fall to delusions and join the Enchantress, only to betray her like she did in the original movie, but give it more time. So that way maybe you could properly convince the audience that Harley, who up to this point would have shown very little morality, actually has turned. And then have her plan play a key role in beating the Enchantress, properly justifying her being there. Finally, if there's one way I'd finish the movie, it's have them beat the Enchantress, then show them all together in prison again, watching a news story about Batman saving the town from some other villain, and showing how their heroism is being completely ignored, and how they aren't going to receive any rewards from this. But also have them all roasting Batman and bragging about how they're the better heroes. You know, show that they've grown as a team, they've grown to like each other. And then have Deadshot finally getting a meeting with his daughter. Then have him return to Waller, who says he'll get more meetings in the future because the Suicide Squad plan has been officially approved, leaving it on a sequel hook. But all these are just potential ideas I came up with on the fly, and I'm sure they could be improved upon. The ultimate change I would have made is making it a more character-driven movie, rather than an action-driven movie. As I've said, no one came to this movie wanting to see a boring villain enact a boring plan involving yet another sky laser. People wanted to see these characters, people wanted to see the character interactions and dynamics, people wanted a change from the usual superhero formula, people wanted to have a good laugh. And there's potential here to provide that. I realised there was a lot of problems behind the scenes of this movie, with many reshoots and edits. And it really shows given how noticeably bad some of the editing is. I can't help but wonder if this contributed to the lack of development of these characters. Maybe at some point in the writing, the script had more solid interactions and development that got tossed aside as not important as the action. I don't know, but I do know that failing to provide such content was a mistake. If there's a lesson to be learned from Suicide Squad, it's that if you're going to make a movie with a selling point of being unconventional, then actually go all out with that. Don't make it the usual cliched story just wearing an edgy hat. If people want a fun romp with fun villains learning how to work together, don't treat it like your typical superhero movie. Don't be afraid to keep things low-key, but rely on the characters that people can grow to love. And that, my friends, is precisely what went wrong.